Welcome to our next session, The Hardest to Serve, addressing tough issues faced by low-income dads.
I am the father of a 9-year-old little girl and a 6-year-old little boy, and I find fatherhood both relentlessly challenging and relentlessly rewarding. Both of our children came to us in amazing ways. My daughter is biological and my son is adopted. I love them both so much, from the morning when you wake up to putting them to bed at night and every moment in between. It really is so special, and boy, is it exhausting. One thing that I fear about being a parent is the future for my children, because I think a parent's job is to protect our children, but also prepare them for the world so they become good, kind human beings. But I'm also hopeful that the future holds a more inclusive and compassionate world for them. And I know that they're going to make the world a better place.
There we go. Welcome and thank you, guys. My name is James Worthy, and I'm so excited to be here for this next session we're having. And I know you've been getting some of the best knowledge, some of the best information, and we want to keep that process going. And this session, entitled "The Hardest to Serve: Addressing Tough Issues Faced by Low-Income Dads." And I'll tell you guys, we have two incredible colleagues with me today, none other than David Kozar. He's the director of the Lexington Leadership Foundation, their fatherhood initiative. And then we have Sherry Doherty, who is the program director and lead trainer for Child Find of America. Hey guys, welcome to the stage today. How are you?
Good to be here, James.
Well, you know, I'm happy to have both of you, and blessed to know both of you and know your work, and have opportunity share with you and I partnering with the work that we do, and with the National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse. And David, it's been years, guys, so I truly appreciate this time. And for all of you who are hearing this session today, we're going to delve into some information and some tips and nuggets around probably the meat of serving dads. Because in this time, and I'm going to ask both of you, and I'm going to come to you first, Sherry. In this time, you know, serving dads, and unfortunately, we've categorized things with, you know, socioeconomic and low income, and I get that. But in that realm, there's even more difficulties. And during this pandemic, I'm sure things have gotten even more difficult for fathers to address, and families to address. So Sherry, I'm gonna come to you, and I want you to kind of introduce your organization and the services you provide, but also answer the question: what are the new hardest to deal with, I guess, barriers that you have found that you're addressing during this time? So Sherry, I'll throw it over to you.
Okay, thanks, James. Child Find was founded in 1980 by the parent of a missing child. It was a parental abduction, and back then, no one was providing services. Law enforcement wouldn't get involved. This child was gone for 8 years and taken overseas. Since then, we have a wealth of services to address and statutes now. In 2007, we opened our Parent Help program, and that's the program that we partner with the National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse to provide services. We speak to parents across the country. Our services are free and confidential, and we basically brainstorm how to help our callers understand what their options are. The realistic options, sometimes people are asking for a drastic change in a situation that may not be feasible or possible for them. So we basically brainstorm what the true options are for them, all the way up through, on occasion, reaching out to the other parent and offering conflict resolution services on occasion, if it's appropriate. And I'd say the most difficult thing we've seen that's been exacerbated over the past year and a half or so with the pandemic is the lack of access to a court system for somebody who's feeling desperate and somebody who's feeling like there's an obstacle course in front of him. And so that's gotten worse. Obviously, even though we can have telephonic appearances, the courts got jammed up. So we see the panic, the fear has intensified for dads who aren't being given access to their children for whatever reason, and all the way up through missing children, which is a situation we also address.
Wow. Yeah. But and we hope to come, we're gonna come back and really discuss that. David, I want to come over to you, man, because the work you're doing in Kentucky. Tell us about your organization and what are some of the biggest hurdles you guys have had to address with working with the dads you work with?
Thank you, James. Good seeing you again, my brother. It has been a while, and what an honor and pleasure it is to be a part of this Fatherhood Field Hall of Fame agenda. If you want to see the Mount Rushmore Fatherhood Field, just go to this agenda. You'll see the folks. Sans me, but I'm glad to be in the mix, brother. So, hey, so yeah, David Cozart, Lexington Leadership Foundation, obviously in Lexington, Kentucky. Um, I provide leadership to the Fatherhood Initiative. The Leadership Foundation is a faith-based organization that seeks to connect, unify, and mobilize people of faith and goodwill. The community of faith is one of the largest or under mobilized machines and armies in the world, and we seek to mobilize them in tackling the toughest issues. And in so doing, we use the modality of identifying the person of faith and goodwill, increasing their capacity to do work, and building joint initiatives. That's what we call our wheel of change or wheel of transformation. And any of our programs will adopt that modality to do its programming. So the Fatherhood Initiative is no different. We identify volunteers from that community. We increase their capacity by training them as facilitators, providing technical assistance and quality control. And then we identify and recruit men into our cohorts, and our staff, along with our volunteers, deliver educational, responsible fatherhood, education, and other resources fathers need. And additionally, I am the inaugural president of an emerging state organization, the Commonwealth Center for Fathers and Families, that is seeking to propagate fatherhood engagement and programming across the state of Kentucky in places where there are gaps. What are some of the emerging issues, Brother Worthy, you ask? We've heard many of the brilliant people that are presenting here talk about collaboration and collective impact. That's exactly what we seek to do. We have found during this time, and you'll hear me talk from an agency provider, from a systemic standpoint, and for the participant standpoint. This is for as a provider and those seeking to provide the services. It is a referral-based service we often use, and our referrals come from some agencies that, as Sherry mentioned, are no longer meeting in the traditional and most functional way. And so we found that the men coming to our doors through our partners has been reduced. Our cohorts have been reduced some. And for the participant, the challenge, you heard Sister Littlejohn and Mr. Barr from South Carolina talk about the importance of the relational element in this body of work. And it's difficult to be relational in this virtual space. Therefore, it's more difficult to develop the rapport with those individual participants because you just don't have that touch. So those are a couple of the many challenges that we've identified.
David, you and Sherry both hit on something in this work, and you're correct with the relationship and all of that. You hit it right on the head. In this work, and I want to stay first of all as practitioners working with different agencies, different things. There's some agencies that no matter what is going on in the life of that father, these agencies still move. And Sherry, you said the court system. Another one that would come to mind is the child support systems. So can you give us, Sherry, some of the ways that you're addressing the systemic shutdown and changes? Because now we've opened back up and things are shutting down, and guys are still needing to talk to the courts. Scott, guys are still needing that help. How are you coaching, working with, and guiding fathers to deal with that, the frustrations and the actual usage of those systems? I'm gonna throw that to you.
Right. So we can't send them someplace that has a closed door, obviously. Um, I I believe that, and I've been hearing this a lot throughout the conference in a beautiful way, is that giving a dad a safe place to talk about his fears and his dreams and his hopes, his concerns, his needs, is extraordinarily helpful. We don't close cases. Luckily, we've got that our doors open for as long as he needs it to be, and he can come back at any point. But I know that David had mentioned that giving services, realistic services that are available, is the kindest and only good work that we can do at the point where we're limited, or the dads are limited in what they have access to. So we just keep the door open and we continue to talk, and we talk about creative ways to maybe minimize something that's become much more difficult at the moment. It could be contact with the child. It could be creative ways to have contact, to continue contact with the child. And basically, there was no federal approach, and which makes sense, to when a court order was being violated within the parameters of the pandemic. So some judges were saying, yeah, go ahead, you got to keep to the original order, and others were saying you got to hold off because of the increased risks. We saw a mom who was a doctor lose custody because the dad was concerned and about her. It was early on in the pandemic, but her exposing the children. So as we always do, we take one case at a time. In a vacuum, we treat every family as a very unique family that isn't like other families. And so we just have to continue to keep the door open, basically, until things improve.
Wow. So just as a firm, as an organization, you're doing what Dr. Brown said. Every case is a study of one, and truly, it we don't know. These times call for us to pivot and think through it. So I love the fact that the doors are always open and you provide that safe space. Now, David, I know in the work that you do economic stability, and also in that is usually talks around child support. Am I correct? So with those changes and guys losing jobs and trying to find jobs, how are you coaching guys in the work world to still manage a system of child support? Because we believe in taking care of our children. We don't teach people not to. So how have you guys tackled some of that and being able to sustain guys and work with guys to make sure that they can stay on top of these things? You're muted out.
Sherry and I were trying to get everybody to forget Dr. Brown's dynamic presentation because we were scared to follow it. There you go, bringing it back up. Dynamic work, Dr. Brown. Thank you. God bless you. So that child support challenge has been here for a period of time, because we know often our systems have not been set up to, or have not been as open to that non-residential parent, and has at times been biased. We have research on that. And so it remains a problem. Those issues have been exacerbated in these latter days. And with the low income father, whatever illustration you want to use, a father or someone that's running the same race but carrying weights, or has ankle weights on, or has a weight vest on. And so the low income father that's working through these child support issues and that are trying to work, and yes, James, not attempting to elude their responsibility of economic support. What we know that we need to do is really look at those systems, man, try to help advocate for these non-residential parents, most frequently fathers, and helping systems understand, in this case, the child support system, that they can use some subjectivity because, as Sherry said, there is subjectivity that occurs. They can use some of their subjectivity and discernment to allow some latitude with fathers that are given due diligence. And so we try to be that advocate. We know that we need to be that advocate. So we develop relationships, again, with our local child support office. We're working to develop relationships with our state enforcement agency, as well as trying to join with folks like in this conference and other leaders in the field in helping policies, procedures, and practices get created that are most conducive to healthy family formation. And child support has a great opportunity to do that. I won't rehearse what Dr. Perry said earlier in the week or yesterday, but I will say that it's a real thing, and that if I get accused of committing a crime, Miranda Wright says you have a right to an attorney, and if you don't have an attorney, one will be assigned to you. Conversely, if I am being forthright going to the courts seeking to create a right-size support order, right, a shared parenting order for my child or children, I don't have an attorney. And so these are the challenges that exist. And we try to advocate for policies, procedures, and practices that are conducive to those we serve.
Awesome.
And children.
Absolutely, because that's where the rubber meets the road, is at the child.
Sure.
So as I hear this, David, you're in that Kentucky world, and Sherry, you're dealing with national. People can be calling from all over, and we do know that different states, different jurisdictions are different. As a matter of fact, someone just put in our chat the Maryland COVID 2020 custody arrangement stay is in effect. So please, guys, check that out. But I want to ask some questions on now. We know the systems are struggling because of the pandemic we're in, the change for systematic, need for systematic change, all of that. But now let's talk about how Sherry, and I'll go to you, how you guys coach and work and give resources to the dad, because systems are going to be systems. You're going to have to go through them. It's not like you can walk away from them. So give either some ideas or some knowledge. And as you quote things or tell about the different things you share, I want everybody here to know that we have resources. Don't get worried. You're going to hear these guys throwing stuff out. Don't get worried. We got resources, and all of this will be available to you. So Sherry, I'm throwing it to you because you guys got a lot of resources. You have the licensed social workers doing the coaching, helping people. So talk a little bit about how you help the dad stay on track. What are some of the things you suggest to him?
We work towards, underneath everything, we're all trained mediators here at Child Find. And one thing we try very hard not to do is to not give advice, because everybody's got advice. Nobody wants advice. Basically, we remind people, dads, that they are the experts of their own families, of their own histories, of their own situations. And we work towards a self-empowerment and self-directed model for them. But the truth is that child support doesn't live separately from the relationship between the other parent and the children. So we work very hard to remind people that it's a family, and things get off track when we forget what our values are. And we do consider money an actual value, meaning what is it that's significant to you about the money? Is it education? Is it freedom? Is it access? So we work basically to try to expand the conversation with a dad. And if he's calling about child support, we discuss the relationships. We skill build conflict skills. And we introduce the idea, though, that these things aren't they don't live in separate boxes. They're all together with the whole family and all the things that are tied in with, sometimes domestic violence or substance use or mental health matters. We try a very holistic approach to make sure if you're going to tell someone that he's got to pay child support and he doesn't have a home, then you work on finding resources for housing. But you also, at the same time, again, we really, really focus on reminding people that whether you're living together or not, you're a family. And we have to look in the future and not want the child to choose which parent's going to be at the graduation. So we look long term. So we basically, one of the questions we ask that unsticks dads is, what does your life look like in a year from now? Honestly, just asking somebody what he wants can shut down a conversation. Sometimes people don't really know what it is. So we ask them to maybe envision what it is they're going for, and then try to talk about the ways to get there. And conflict resolution is almost always at the bottom of most things that ail these families.
Wow. Sherry, you unpacked a lot there, because it really does give the dad, from the mediation way you do it, give the dad the empowering glimpse that he can handle this. And I love that support. And you do that on a national basis. I want people to know that this is national services out there. But now, David, I'm gonna come to you, because Kentucky, like most states, it's vast and it has these ups and downs, these turns, these morphs. So how do you coach dads on specific resources in your jurisdiction on working with the different systems and handling all of, because I come in and I'm yelling child support, so I don't, my child support is not paid, so I'm not seeing my kid. And are they mutually are they inclusive? Is that mutually exclusive? Child support versus visitation and pandemic and all of that stuff. So kind of talk to me how you work with fathers in Kentucky around managing their own angst.
Let me shift to healthcare systems or housing resources, your local housing authority, or all of those things that a father needs to meet his basic needs. How will we assist with that? And so what we've come to understand is, because fathers have not been served traditionally, at least in my experiences, standardly in human services, we understand that fathers go to these resources with trepidation. We could hand them a card and say, hey, they're doing housing over here, and hand them a card and say, hey, you can get some healthcare assistance over at this community clinic. We would find that they do not always follow up on them. Why? Because there's a discomfort there, not unlike maybe the discomfort that international residents experience. And so we found that we don't hold hands and enable, but we do disciple and walk with, right? And so what we know we need to do as the practitioner, we know that a practitioner to practitioner call, it will clear the way or expedite some services. And so myself and my program director and everyone in our agency make it a point to build relationships and collaborations with other agencies, so that when a father comes to our door and we don't have in-house mental health services, we can call our local mental health services and says, I'm sending you one of mine, right? Now he's got some substance misuse disorder, so he's supposed to be there tomorrow, but it might be Monday. But we're working with him, work with us as we work with them. So one of the resources you'll see that I put in the resource box is this simple idea of collective impact and systems leadership, because it speaks to those of us that are practitioners and leaders, how we need to have some collective intelligence and some and be in relationship if we really want to effectively serve. And so we say if you're doing it alone, you're doing it wrong. And so how does that translate to better service to fathers? That means I've got a relationship with my mental health folks in town and across the state. I've got a relationship with the code enforcement. I've got a relationship with any of these individuals or agencies that impact the lives of the fathers and families and children we're seeking to serve, so that I can be a kind of a universal ombudsman for on behalf of folks.
Wow. And you know, it's very apparent why your program, David, in Kentucky, and Sherry, the work that Parent Help does, it's apparent because everything you're saying is you don't leave someone to try to figure it out. You walk them through and almost do your own warm handoff. It's and I've been in this work for 30 years, and one of the things I always said to guys is the way we usually find help is David picks up the phone and say, "Yo, this is my man James. Yo, James, this my girl Sherry. She got you." And sometimes we forget that when working with agencies. So I really appreciate that. And what I want to ask now, guys, because I want the audience to be able to throw some questions at you guys to really have a little bit of time to talk. So we're going to keep that going, and you can drop stuff in here. But Sherry, I want to come to you real quick. How do you guys get people into wraparound services in their communities if they're calling from a national? How's that work? And so we know you as a resource, because I may have a guy leave Maryland or Baltimore where I am, connect with you, and I can maybe get him help in another area. So talk to us about how you navigate the nation.
Sure. Well, we do a lot of research, basically, but we don't stop doing research. We have to be very careful. We make sure not to give somebody a referral to someone who either isn't open any longer because they've lost funding, or they changed their services and they don't assist. Sometimes I've given a referral to a dad, and he called me back and said they don't help dads. And I got on the phone and talked to a supervisor just to ask, can you further train your staff? I'd like to continue to send people to you. But basically, we have an information and referral specialist, but all of our caseworkers have to research how the legal system works. We have to understand legal options, because sometimes mediation or conflict resolution is simply not possible or appropriate. But the truth is, it has to be done in real time. You can't send someone somewhere and only to discover that you've been giving a terrible referral for 10 years. So part of it is we're still connecting with the dad. So we're getting feedback from him and seeing, were you able to get assistance there? Since we're self-directed, honestly, we don't push and we don't bug and we don't check in to see if he's done it, because of a lot of our dads are in a bad way. We might have people calling from transition homes, or people that are homeless, or our low-income dads in particular. If they've failed to get legal assistance, we try to find resources that build him up with self-help knowledge, and give him information about what it's going to look like when you go to court, and how to prepare for court if you need to do it on your own. But basically, it's just it's an ongoing real-time process where we have to just keep searching, keep calling, and making sure that we're not giving stale or useless referrals to people.
Wow. And that's, I wanted to ask that question because I know, as David say, you're the local ombudsman. I can't even say the word, but that I love the fact that you really are that conduit, and you do it nationally. But there was a question that came up, and I want to throw this out to either one who wants to tackle this, because this is one of those questions that may come up in mediation, or it may come up with a guy that's sitting in your program. How do you balance mandated reporting when it comes to child abuse? That's one of those questions. I want you guys to think on that. I'm gonna reiterate this, because this now, mediation and services, how do you balance and I want to make sure I'm asking this question right. How do you balance mandated reporting? So we as mandated reporters, how do we balance that when it comes to child abuse? So I'm gonna go to the mediator. David, you look like you want. I'm gonna open that up to one of you
I
guys.
do. I have stuff to say. Um, we're not mandated reporters.
Okay. Okay, great.
Doesn't mean we haven't found ourselves on occasion. I've been here 15 years. I've seen it happen twice where we needed to call. But the way people can reach out to us on the phone, hang up if they want, engage services if they want, we promise them confidentiality. At the same time, it's a great question about balance, because the truth is, Child Find mandate is to see that children are in a safe and legal environment. So we're very careful. We have caseworker case conferences all the time. We have a child welfare specialist. We do have a social work intake person. We have a lot of knowledge about the legal system. I'm sex trafficking specialist. All of that, we case conference basically, and we case plan to not make things worse, basically, for anybody. And if it's child abuse, it's at the top of the list. We won't do anything that enhances risk to a child.
Awesome. David, you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, I want to thank you for that answer, Sherry. I wanted to make sure I saw Brother Bob's question in the chat as well, that I was answering in context. If you're talking about a identified instance that one of the fathers that we're in relationship with, an identified abuse instance, we talk real serious about that with them. So if there was an approach as a practitioner, I think that could win low-income fathers or any father over, it would be care, comprehensive family services, and then candor. You got to care for them. You got to be authentic. They'll know it or not. You've heard that all the last 2 days. So I'm assuming everybody in here authentically and sincerely wants to serve fathers so that children and families can thrive. I'm assuming that folks have heard the message that we need comprehensive services. Someone in Maryland said it's tough to come by. Yes, it is, but you keep working towards that. But that third one's real important in my anecdotal sort of approach, candor. We talk to fathers like they are fathers and men. And brother, if you come in here smelling like some substance that you ain't even supposed to be doing, we carefully and candidly address it like we're family. And if there are issues with you and your child, we want to find out if there are some issues that we need to address in you. But we've got to make sure that child is in a safe situation. And furthermore, Father, you don't want to hurt your child or see your child hurt. And so we have a real candid conversation about that. We're a first do no harm organization too, as Sherry alluded to. But we don't play around if there are children that are potentially in dangerous situations. And we don't vacate those fathers that may have made a mistake, that did something that may have put a child, their daughter or their son, in a compromised situation. I talk differently in house when I'm talking about it, but we deal with it. Heads up.
All right, and that's and that's why this topic is so this session is because that's one of those things, those hard, tough situations to address. Anytime where there's violence or abuse, and we're doing this work, you gotta address it. You can't pull a wool over the eyes of it. You got to address it. So Bob, I'm glad you got something out of that. Anybody else, drop some questions in. We have experts or learners, expert learners in this field that can share what they do on a day-to-day basis. And as we look for some, as we watch to see if there's any other questions, I got a real question to ask, because I want to, someone brought this up yesterday, and this was not scripted, but there's a a difficult conversation that is becoming more and more relevant. And it's working with dads whose children may identify self-identify as in lesbian, gay, bisexual, what have you, and helping dads love unconditionally and work with their child. So I don't know, and I'm gonna come to you, Dave, David, because you're seeing guys, as you say, we in a man-to-man talk, and this is a man-to-man talk that you can really got to help, especially if a guy is stereotypical. I think what Dr. B said, guess what? Stereotypes can kill. So how do you work with, talk about, and deal with? And then Sherry, I want to talk to you about what are some of the resources you may be able to share with people if a dad is calling you struggling with that situation.
Yeah. There are lots of bodies of work that are going on clinically, because this is a constantly emerging phenomena for families, for caretakers, for educational institutions, for anyone that interacts with the human condition. This is something that is emerging. Regardless of where you fall on your opinion about such, if a father asked me that, and they were likely asked a question like this, James, man, my son is, or my daughter I caught messing around with, or my son is telling me he is, or my daughter thinks she is. And I would stop them at the first two words, my son, my daughter. And whatever follows that does not negate those two words. And so let's work from that frame of mind. Because that could be my son is identifying as, or my daughter is feels she is, or it could be my son wrecked the car, my son stole this, my son drank this, my son smoked this. I don't care how holy you think you are, and everybody else in this call may act. We've all been at the backside of my son, or on the other end of my daughter. And so that may sound anecdotal, but that's where I talk with men and stop them. Now let's identify some of the behavioral, social behavioral issues that may be influencing you and your son and your daughter. Let's talk about where you live and the impacts, but they're your son and they're your daughter, and it's an issue you need to learn of and listen to them. It's the communication skills in any good curriculum. It's the conflict resolution in any good curriculum. It's dealing with stress and dealing with challenges that's in any good curriculum, whether it's Chris's NFI that I'm seeing cited or other curricula that are used throughout this nation. They are going to have something about dealing with issues, conflict resolution as it relates to your co-parenting and your children. So I just remind them that's your children. Figure it out and let's deal with it. And I'll do it with you, by the way, because we've all dealt with it in our households.
Absolutely,
Families.
absolutely. And I think back to Dr. B's earlier talk, love, light, and insight. You gotta love your child no matter what. So, Sherry, you got anything you want to weigh in on that question? And then we got a few minutes, from 5 minutes, to wrap up with your final thoughts.
Okay, I'll make it quick then. I will put on my child find hat for this one, because this is an extraordinarily important issue because of runaways and throwaways. A thrownaway is a kid who's thrown out of the house before the age of majority. The issue of sexual identification, whatever gender name a child would like to be identified by, if that child is not accepted in the home, that child is at risk for either running away, possibly running away to the other parent, because we actually do have a lot of hybrid cases where it's a runaway, but it's to a non-residential parent, to the one that might accept the child. But in the meantime, if a child, it doesn't feel accepted and winds up looking for that kind of supports outside the system, is at serious risk of sex trafficking. And 1 out of 7 kids who leaves the home is at risk for finding him or herself or themselves as being sex trafficked. The dads don't want to see that happen. And so we basically A lot of it is education about missing children. A lot of it is education about where you can get supports from, PFLAG and other type of resources of dealing with the fact that a child's sexuality is something that is not accepted in your home. We have a little woodshed, I guess, is what we call it. I will, just like David said, we will take people to the woodshed and we will say what you're doing is harmful to your child. Your goal is this with your child. What you're doing is putting your relationship, but your child in direct risk as well. So that's actually a very serious and very important discussion, and we do very often address that.
Yeah, and I'm glad that we had an opportunity to talk about that, because and I think it's one of the toughest things to overcome is a bias against fathers or bias against anyone. And in this time, as we wrap this up, we got about 3 minutes left. I'm gonna come to you, Sherry, and just ask, from your vantage point, from the work that you've done, if I were to come in here late to this session and I say, give me one piece of coaching that you would give me as a practitioner and serving dads through hard and difficult times, what would that coaching be? And then I'm gonna come to you with that, David, to wrap it up. So Sherry, I'm coming to you first.
Okay, one problem that we see sometimes is some practitioners might come in with a bent, meaning I'm an advocate, I'm a dad advocate, and sometimes that actually shuts down conversations and it increases the adversarial system that dad is now entering into. We don't want to see that happen. So if we automatically assume that the other parent is at fault, and rather than helping dad be introspective, you know what? If you find out that you had something to do with the bad situation you're in, you're really lucky, because that means that you might have some power to get yourself out of it. So basically is to be careful with when you say advocacy, advocate for a family, because that's what will raise the dad up. But advocating against these other systems or against the other parent is bound to just make things more hostile, which benefits no one.
Aha moment. Thank you. David, I'm coming to you. What would be I'm coming in your office, man. I'm dealing with too much. Give me some coaching on how to make this thing work against the toughest stuff out here.
So I'm gonna exhort and encourage them. And as a practitioner, if you're just jumping in, what I would say is we have to realize the assets that exist and the resilience that exists in the fathers. We have to realize that there can be resiliency to a fault. There are diminishing returns to resiliency, and this population has sought to survive and has done it and survived in ways that we could never survive. And so we need to take those assets and help them to be able to transfer those into stable situations, and don't ever, ever think that because a father is low income, that automatically qualifies them as a poor father in the sense of their ability to be useful to their children. Economic poverty does not necessarily mean emotional poverty or their lack of desire to be the best father to their children.
Well, you know what, guys, again, you dropped the mic. Thank you. And I want to thank you all for being on this call. We're going to get ready to transition to our next event. But remember that there is resources that come along with this. So please make sure you use them. And I'm excited. We will be taking a break until 3 o'clock. So don't go anywhere. Take a minute, get a drink, do what you need, and be back for our 3 o'clock session. So I'll turn it over to our host and our announcers. Thank you guys for everything, David and Sherry.